Aaron's really wrapped up in this project he's working on. He's kind of going a little bit crazy. He loves the movie Blade Runner. He saw it when he was 12, hated it at first, but he saw the director's cut at a theater here in Milwaukee called the Oriental Theater, and it made it this amazing experience for him. Before the show, there was an organ player who was playing some of the music by Vangelis, and then right when the showtime came, the organ sunk into the floor, and it was just this amazing movie experience, and he's loved it ever since. So he's not like a huge prop collector, but he loves movies, and he has a few prop things around, but he always wanted something from Blade Runner. Since the architecture of the film is such a main character, he was always drawn to those tiles that make up Deckard's apartment.
The Charles Ennis House in LA served as the exterior for his building, and they continued the tile theme in the studio interiors. This is a weird and wild house designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, who, while I love his designs, I really think he was sometimes just trying to trick people into using his buildings no matter how unlivable and uncomfortable they were. The Ennis House is built out of concrete tiles with a pattern reminiscent of Maya temples and sits up on a hill just like a monument, or like a house on a hill. The House on Haunted Hill, which it was used for in 1959. The building was used as a location for seemingly impossible number of films and movies. Every list I find seems incomplete, and it has a few more that I've never even heard of. Making the short list: The Rocketeer, Rush Hour, Fallen Angels, The 13th Floor, Black Rain, The Glimmer Man, The Replacement Killers, The Day of the Locust, The Terminal Man, a Ricky Martin video, Time Stalkers, The Beatniks, Karate Kid Part 3, Blood Ties, Twin Peaks, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and of course, Blade Runner.
The tiles themselves are fascinating. Like so many of Wright's designs, they seem incredibly simple at first, but become increasingly complex the more you stare at them.
Wright uses this seemingly simple complexity often in things like windows and wood inlays. At first glance, it's just a bunch of vertical lines with some angles on the top. But the more you look, the more relationships seem to form between each line and space. It's very Escher-like in how he plays with the layers and what's on top of what, and what intersects and what joins together. These tiles have that sort of complexity. They look like just a few squares within squares, but there are bunches of levels and intersecting lines, and it's pretty tough to decode what exactly is happening across the surface.
I guess this is kind of a weird thing to want. It's not really a movie prop, but when he started looking into this, he discovered there's a bunch of forums online of people who've tried to build them. So I guess he's not the only weirdo. And that's part of the problem.
A few videos back, I made a replica of the headpiece of the Staff of Ra from Raiders of the Lost Ark. About halfway through the sculpting process, I realized that I was actually working off of a picture of somebody else's homemade replica, and that it really wasn't all that accurate at all.
It turned out okay enough, and he had fun making it. However,
dumb mistake, a real rookie move, and one I knew I couldn't afford to make again. This time I had to play it real smart, check every length, double check every angle. 2, 2, 4, and noodles. I can't trust a word of what gets posted on Blade Runner sites by what we in the business call fan jobs. Gonna have to get my specs direct from the source, study the film frame by frame.
on.
Oh my God. Thank you. Just trying to get these measurements right. This thing's a lot more complex than it seems.
Do you like the burger?
Yeah. It's artificial.
Of course.
Where was I? Oh, I have to study the film frame by frame. Enhance 224 to 176.
Sorry, I'm having trouble
Enhance 224 to 176. Enhance and scan. Give me a hard copy right there. After looking at hundreds of photos and bunches of video, I was pretty confident that I had a good idea of all the lines and shapes and how deep all the channels were and what overlapped what and so on. I even got the exact dimensions from a chunk of Ennis stone that was held as part of the collection at the Met, where, as a piece of art, they list accurate dimensions. I then made a Photoshop file with a bunch of different layers that were color-coded so that I could figure out what exactly I needed to cut for each layer of the tile.
Beautifully.
I remember lessons. I don't know if it's me or Tyrell's niece.
We're taking this joke too far.
All right, it's time to cut a whole bunch of wood for this project. No more time to screw around. There are no photos of the original plugs or the positive parts of the molds for the Ennis tiles that I can find anywhere. It seems to be believed that they were built out of wood and then molds were cast in metal, which were used to make the concrete blocks. I'm using hardboard because it's stable, it glues together really nice, and it has very little texture. It has no wood grain. Also, the thickness of the hardboard is perfect for building up the levels on the tiles. There are a lot of cuts for this project, a lot of precise cuts. I was starting to have serious doubts about this project. Doubts about me. The kind of doubts that better artists are able to push through. The kind of doubts, well, this is the kind of project that can turn your hair white. I've cut pieces you people wouldn't believe. This one's for Zora. This one's for PRISS.
You do this for every project. It's going to be fine. It's just one tile. You just tiled this whole bathroom. You're gonna be fine. You've got this. You've got this.
That's the spirit! Time to glue. I'm I'm using regular old wood glue just to hold the layers together. It's really great for hardboard, and I really only need to use a clamp once or twice.
Your face, Aaron.
Okay. How was Janice today?
What are you doing?
I'm making those tiles.
Making tiles?
Remember from that movie?
Oh yeah, I'm going to help. I'm gonna help you.
Oh yeah?
Help you. Yeah.
You like making stuff?
Yeah.
It's pretty fun to make stuff. You know that? Look, it's the George. Hi, George.
I just really said zip your face to Aaron, and I really love this video and give us thumbs up.
I'm filling in the small cracks with a product called Volcom Sealant. I could have just used any sort of spackle or wood filler, but the Volcom was within reach, so I used that. Trove tip! For cleanup of just about anything, I found these Tubbo Towel products. They wipe up everything, super great. I spilled a bunch of oil-based paint on the floor and they wiped it right up. Caulk, sealant, silicone, tile grout, nail polish, stove grease, these things are practically magic, and they're totally safe for the skin. So anyone who likes making messes like I do should seriously totally have these things around. I'm not getting paid to say this, just really think you should have them. Finally, I did 2 coats of hammer finish paint. I love this stuff by Rust-Oleum. It's a little thicker than most oil paints, it doesn't need a primer, and it obviously dries with a sort of hammered metal texture, which helps hide little imperfections and provides a perfect surface for these tiles. I also think it seems to cure harder than most paints. So there's the finished wood piece. I think it looks pretty great in this color. The second coat wound up being red, as you can see. Next up, we're going to make a mold from this so that we can replicate it in plaster, plastic, or concrete, or whatever we decide. For the mold, I'm using a product by Smooth On called Umu 30. I don't know why it's called that. It seems to be highly recommended. It's a 2-part rubber that gets mixed 1-to-1 by volume, so it's really easy to measure. You don't have to do anything by weight. Each part is a color. One is pink, one is blue. So when you don't see any more color differences in the mix, you know you've done a good job mixing. I made this simple box to make the mold in, and I hot glued the tile down to the bottom of it, just so that it doesn't float up in the rubber. The Umu pours pretty nice, and it says that it will seek its own level and that it usually will not have any air bubbles. Well, we'll see. After it cures, I gave it 7 hours, 1 more than it asks for. I carefully disassemble the box and remove the mold. And now we have a 3D negative of our wooden tile. Our first reproduced tile will be out of plaster, since that's what I have here. It's cheap, and I already went over budget on supplies for this project, so I'm not going to buy anything else. But ultimately, I will be making these things out of a strong, lightweight plastic, which will be much easier to hang on a wall with something like double-sided tape. They'll be more cost-effective to ship to you amazing people if you decide that you also cannot live without one. Letting the plaster dry for about 3 hours just to be sure it's good and hard. Probably only needs about 20 or 30 minutes. And I pull the rubber off the plaster, and there we have it. Now this project was a lot of fun, even though it was pretty tricky figuring everything out, cutting out all the intricate pieces and fitting it all together. Sure, I could have made or even bought a 3D file and then sent it to a 3D printer, but making it by hand was so much more satisfying. I think we were all slightly dreading a world where anything we want can be instantly printed by a machine. I think it's better to make things, even if it means losing your mind for a while during the process. And after it's all done and you have a satisfying project under your belt, it's good to just take a little rest and dream. Maybe of electric sheep, maybe of unicorns.
Thank you so much for watching.